From the queens of the west to the king of the north, a small sheep farm passed through the generations takes on a new lease of life in Dalvik.
My name is Jökull Bergmann, which is impossible to pronounce, so most people call me JB. I'm a 46-year-old internationally certified mountain guide, and I come from this place, Klangsholt Farm, on the Troll Peninsula in northern Iceland. I grew up here on this farm with my grandparents, who were the last sheep farmers in a long line of sheep farmers. I'm pretty much the 32nd generation direct descendant of the first settlers that settled here, and they brought sheep with them. So a long history of living in these mountains, mostly obviously tending to sheep. But I wasn't too keen on the sheep, so I decided to go with people instead. Or tomorrow morning we have to bring one machine to Akureyri.
Which machine?
Well, whichever one.
You can do that.
Well, in the early days growing up here on the farm, you would mostly be up in the mountains. And my grandparents, they were both very adventurous people, and you know, the sense of being adventurous in those days. Like my grandfather, he would go to the top of a peak even if he didn't need to go there. And most of the farmers in the region, they thought he was a pretty silly man, you know, having this sort of drive to actually go to the top of the mountains even if he didn't have to. That was my first guiding job when I was actually 6 years old. I was hanging out here when some Swiss lady showed up and wanted to go to the top of the mountain above the farm. And my grandfather was busy making hay, so he just told the Swiss lady in his very broken English that that was not a problem, he would just send me. And she obviously looked at me, 6 years old, and said, "What?" But, you know, she really wanted to go up there, and I walked up there with her and made the first error in my guiding career that day, because when we were kind of halfway down the mountain, sort of where it was simple walking down, I had enough and I just ran home and left her up there. So, you know, a bit of a guiding mistake, you could say, but that's how it started. I didn't really grow up skiing. Pretty much all mountain guides, they become either climbers that become skiers or skiers that become climbers. And I was definitely a climber who had to become a skier to be able to finish my guide certification. So my early days were mostly focused on the climbing part of things and mountaineering. And I then moved on to skiing sort of in my early 20s pretty much. Hi, I'm JB with Bergmann Mountain Guides. Just wanted to give you a quick little glimpse at our terrain here in Iceland for ice climbing. Yep, that's ice. Plenty of ice in Iceland. I never thought about guiding as a profession when I was a kid here on the farm. It was more in my teen years when rock climbing became a big part of what I did, and then, you know, I was spending more time away climbing, and spent the first summer season in Chamonix when I was 17. And that's really when things kind of took off for me, in terms of me realizing that there was, you know, something bigger out there than just Iceland and the Troll Peninsula. And you know, I saw the mountain guides working there, and I realized that, you know, you could make a profession out of that.
And what's better is there's plenty of ice right on the coastline. So here you have the Arctic Ocean. Right over there in the middle somewhere is the North Pole. And we go straight over to the hidden land, which is our ski touring and heli skiing terrain. Not bad, skiing right down to the ocean. And if you like cold water, there's plenty of surfing too. But right now, it's ice climbing right off the beach.
In every climber's sort of life and in the progression of things, there are definitely moments where you find yourself in difficult circumstances. And I was extremely motivated to climb at a high level, and that meant obviously pushing the envelope. Back in the 90s, the climbing scene was sort of a bit competitive, and people were going out there trying to do new routes all the time, and I was definitely a part of that movement. And it kind of comes with the territory. If you spend enough time out there, you will have incidents. In 1994, my grandfather had just passed away. There was definitely a lot of pent-up need to go out there and breathe the fresh air and sort of try and work out my own sadness over his passing. Conditions were not great. It was too warm and not enough ice and all that, but still I went with two friends, and we went to do a new route. We hiked up this long slope towards a cliff band where there was some snow, but not much. When we got below the climb in very steep terrain, there was sort of a snow patch, not a very big one, maybe 40 meters by 30 meters directly under the climb that we needed to move through. And I knew the conditions were a bit tricky, so I told my friends to stay behind and I would go check it out. And I basically sort of traversed into that field of snow, and as I was standing in the middle of it, I realized that this was a very, very bad place to be in at that time. And I told my friends I was turning back. And as I took the first step back, the whole thing released and basically flushed down the mountain about 500 meters over several cliff bands and through terrain with no snow. So it was a very fast ride down the mountain, which resulted obviously in very bad injuries to myself, and pretty much very lucky to have survived. I was fully conscious throughout the whole process, and I can sort of remember it step by step or second by second. It obviously doesn't take very long to go down 500 meters at, 180 kilometers an hour in an avalanche, but I do specifically recall the silence. And I remember realizing in that moment of silence that that was what was happening, and that it would really hurt when the noise started again, because then I would be landing. After the rescue was done on site, I was moved to the Akureyri hospital, which is the local hospital, which has a fully sort of functioning emergency room and everything. But they looked at me and decided to ship me straight to Reykjavik on an ambulance flight because it was just too complicated. There was definitely fear of me being paralyzed due to the fact that I had 3 broken vertebrae in my neck and 15 other bones. They put over 450 stitches in me just to kind of stop the bleeding and everything, because the avalanche basically went through scree for a few hundred meters. The doctors were not very positive to begin with. They basically told me that, you know, this was kind of the end of the road in terms of mobility, and that I might not even walk again, or if I could walk again, it would basically be at a pretty limited performance level. Just remember in the hospital thinking that was all bullshit and that I was definitely not going to go there. So I kind of set my mind at that point on a goal, and that goal being to become the first UIGM internationally certified mountain guide in Iceland. Dealing with the emotional pain from losing my grandfather and then having to deal with my injuries was definitely a slow process, especially when you're in a full body brace, laying flat on a hospital bed for weeks and months. But I was very lucky in the sense that it gave me time to contemplate the future. And at that point in time, I hadn't finished any guide certification or anything. So I realized that I could have that goal and use it as a summit to achieve. It gave me direction and drive to recover from both the physical and the mental pain of what had happened before. What drove me to become an internationally certified mountain guide was primarily the fact that it's the hardest thing you can do in the world of guiding. It's the gold standard. Nobody had done it in Iceland. Nobody needs to do it in Iceland because you don't need that certification to do anything around here. You can just call yourself a mountain guide and you're a mountain guide. So in a way, it was completely senseless to go through the whole difficult process of obtaining that certification. But I've always sort of strived to be my best, and when it came to the guiding, I just looked at this, the most difficult and highest standard in the industry, and I thought that's what I needed to do. After the accident, having been waylaid by my injuries, I also realized that you have to have some sort of a backup plan if you can't ski or you can't climb, etc. I decided to shift my focus from Europe and from Chamonix to Canada, where I could go to university, study something that would be useful to me in case I wouldn't be able to work in the physical realm of things, but also do the guiding certification at the same time. Basically sort of lived in Canada from 2003 up until 2008 when I finished my international guide certification. I knew the potential here on the Troll Peninsula, and I always had it in the back of my mind that I would not stay in Chamonix or stay in Canada, that I would always come back here to work. So when I went through my studies, it opened my eyes to the potential that we have here. And obviously being educated in Canada, I learned the ropes in the mechanized world of skiing as well, working for Canadian heliski companies. So despite the fact that we had been ski touring here from '99 up to 2008, I came back home in 2008, sort of just 15 minutes before the world collapsed, and started the first heliski company in Iceland. Sort of knowing from what I'd seen in Canada what I could potentially do here. And so since then we've been running in parallel ski touring and heliski trips in Iceland. In 2008 we did the trial run of running the heli skiing here, and in the fall, in October, the Icelandic krona pretty much lost half its value. That resulted in me being able to sell heli ski trips for the first 3 years or even 4 years at pretty much half price compared to other destinations. So that allowed me to basically build up clientele so that when the Icelandic krona had again become too strong, Iceland was a known size, it was a known place to go. So 2008, there were not many people that benefited from 2008, but I was certainly one of them.
My name is Sven Brunso. I live in Durango, Colorado. I'm 51 years old and I'm a professional free skier. Back in about 2009, I had heard a lot of frenzy about coming skiing in Iceland, and I was really excited to come check it out, just to come ski touring. And through a twist of fate, I got connected with Jökull and Arctic heli skiing. So I kind of came here sight unseen. You know, it was kind of, the internet was starting to explode and there was a little bit of information out there, but it was surely kind of felt like the Wild West, an adventure to come out here. So I came and experienced this for the first time and got hooked. And I just love it. It's raw and real and everything in my mind that skiing should be.
So in the beginning, I focused primarily on trying to get people that were influential in the ski industry at the time to come here, and I was lucky that for instance Sven Brunso, who was skiing with us yesterday here and this week, he came here on a trip in 2009, basically our second season of heli skiing, along with some other pro skiers and photographer Grant Gunderson. And because I needed the material, I needed pictures, I needed promotion in that sense, and I was very lucky to get those guys here at that point in time, because they obviously were like the big professionals in the game, and they provided me with the imagery I needed to continue promoting the product.
When I first visited Iceland, it felt like it was truly alive, like the country was still forming. You know, you'd pull off the side of the road and there was boiling mud pots and steam vents and so on, and it just, you know, probably felt like America was a couple hundred years ago, where around every corner it was something new and really exciting, and that just drew me in. And then I got here and I just found the people like so genuine and authentic, and the landscape and the people just blended together and really made me feel at home.
The difference between heli skiing in Iceland and most other places is quite pronounced. I mean, we're skiing 66 degrees north, which is even further north than Nome, Alaska. You have basically 3 seasons within the season. So we start skiing in February, when, you know, the days are short and the nights are dark and the northern lights are sort of wild in the sky all the time. And in that period you get cold weather, you get cold snow, you're powder skiing, and that sort of lasts up until April, when you start into more of a spring-like cycle where you're skiing corn snow on the solar aspects and you're skiing powder on the north aspects. And then come mid-May, it changes yet again into pretty much primarily corn skiing, but then you have 24 hours of daylight. And once you get into June, you have the midnight sun. And the midnight sun is just this unreal orange glowing light that lasts from about 8 o'clock in the evening all through till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning when the sun starts rising again. Visually, it's very unique in the sense that you're skiing right next to the ocean a lot of the time, with terrain that plunges directly down into the water. You're skiing 1,000-meter fall line runs picking up on a beach, which is pretty unique anywhere in the world.
Trying to figure out the landscape and how to navigate it all. You know, I just kind of turned myself over to JB. This is his backyard, and sometimes you're just up for the adventure, and I let him guide the way, and just tried to be a sponge and learn as much as I could about the history of the area and the topography and the geography. And it was just really exciting kind of seeing it, you know, through his eyes and having him talk about growing up here and hiking these hills. And it's very different when you're, you know, skiing with somebody who this is their lifeblood, you know, this is their home. So it was a very exciting time to be here. And a lot of the runs that we were doing in the helicopter were first descents. And so as a skier, you know, that's kind of the ultimate, to get out of a helicopter and say, hey, someone has probably never before stood on this peak and you're going to get to ski it. And at the end of the day, getting to ski something and then opening up a map and looking at it and getting to name runs that you're the first one to ever ski, it was like super exciting, and just felt really fortunate to be a part of it.
Basically, because of the sort of volcanic nature of the terrain here, and the fact that the landscape is all sculpted by ice, you have pretty much an incredible amount of terrain, because the valleys are all glacier cut or carved V-shaped valleys. And if you put snow on everything here, then about 95% of the entire terrain is great ski terrain. And that's very different from different types of geological areas elsewhere, you know, be it limestone or be it granite or whatever it is, where, you know, you have one ski run here and then you have to fly, you know, a couple of kilometers to the next one. Here, when everything is blanketed in snow, you can ski everywhere.
What I really love about skiing in Iceland, you know, it's very authentic. There's very few people here. It still feels like we're on the frontier. I've been super fortunate to ski from the Andes to the Alps and the Caucasus to the Cascades, and finding someplace new that's undiscovered. Yeah, it's really exciting, you know, for a skier to be out skiing terrain in a really unique place, looking out at a landscape that, you know, 99% of the world will never see. Yeah, you just feel super fortunate, you know, and I've learned in life that, you know, moments of happiness are fleeting, and so when you have them here and everything comes together in a day like we had yesterday, you just feel so fortunate.
Iceland is in Europe, and, you know, we're definitely Europeans. But when it comes to many things, Icelanders are purely North American. And that definitely goes for the sort of mechanized interest of Icelanders as a nation, where, snowmobiling, snow biking, super Jeep travel in winter is still a huge, huge thing. So there's no controversy towards helicopters being in the mountains in that regard. We definitely have people that come skiing with us on ski touring trips who are very much aware of the negative impact of mechanized travel in the mountains in terms of carbon emissions. In general, I would say the heli skiing clientele is also quite aware. They are very happy with the fact that we are basically carbon offsetting our entire operation by our own means in our area. We're not, buying credit. We are basically planting trees on our land to create tree skiing for the future. And more importantly, we are reclaiming wetlands. So this used to be a farm where drainage ditches were dug everywhere through all the wetlands to create fields. And drainage ditches are pretty much a huge carbon emitter in Iceland, one of the biggest carbon emitters in Iceland. And so by reclaiming the wetlands, by filling in drainage ditches, we are offsetting our emissions as a company. Is heli skiing good for the planet? Probably not. But it is what we do, and we try to mitigate those emissions to the best of our abilities, and by zeroing them out with our other actions, we feel comfortable about continuing what we're doing. Well, whichever one. Icelandic ski culture is in its infancy. When I started, there was nothing. There was nobody out there doing anything on skis except, in the ski hills. But that culture is actually very important in Iceland. Ski racing is a really, really big thing considering how small the ski hills are. And if you take Dalvik, our local village where I live, for instance, with a population of 1,200 people and a tow lift of 300 meters, Dalvik Ski Club has produced 7 Olympic ski racers, which is definitely some sort of a world record per capita. But nobody was really going off-piste or into the mountains to ski. So when I started, I was alone, me and my friends, and it was like that for many years.
4th of April, just got back from Canada from heli skiing with Icelandic 10 years, and this is what I got back to, Iceland. More snow than in the last 5 years, and looking like a great spring ski touring and heli skiing season here.
And I started guiding here, and I was definitely the only person guiding people on skis, and slowly things picked up, the word got out. Some guides started showing up with their groups, and then I started the heli skiing and did that for many years before the next one did. And then sort of in that time frame, Icelandic people started spending seasons in the Alps and coming back and doing a bit of backcountry skiing, and today, basically, 25 years later, it's all happening, like it's kind of exploding.
Yeah, one of my most memorable times here was actually the first trip. When we came, we had an amazing day with the helicopter, and we were out flying, and we stopped mid-mountain. The pilot found a place to land, and we just broke out this big picnic lunch. And JB kind of told us about growing up here and being out with his grandfather, and you could just see his eyes light up, and he was just so excited and had such fond memories of being here. and sitting here with somebody kind of vicariously, you know, living their childhood and imagining what it must have been like back in that time to have time with, you know, your grandparent. It was just really exciting, you know, and usually I'm kind of go, go, go. I don't really slow down very often, and I have a hard time relaxing. And we sat there for probably, you know, an hour, hour and a half, and he was just a storyteller. He wasn't a ski guide. He was just someone sharing his life, and it was really exciting to be a part of that. That's one of my fondest memories, just absorbing the landscape and the scenery and being around good people. And ultimately that's what skiing boils down to, is being out with good friends and family in a beautiful place, and, you know, putting everything else behind you.
I don't know if things happen for a reason. We all make our own destiny probably, and I'm definitely a firm believer that there's nobody else out there making it for me, that it's totally up to me to do what I can to make it the way that I want it to be. And this sort of series of events that led me here to this place today, going all the way back to the passing of my grandparents and my grandfather and my big accident and everything, it's no coincidence that we are here today. It was pretty laid out, you know, once I look back and I reflect on it and I see the way I went and how purposefully I sort of marched in that direction. But the fact that it all worked out is maybe a bigger surprise to me, because it was not a given that it would.